Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Fifth Child podcast. I'm your podcaster for today, Chris, and this is the weekly podcast where I give you two different recommendations, either for video game, anime, movie, television series, or other entertainment like that. So for you guys, it's been probably about a week. It's been only a week since you guys have been able to hear me, but for me, this has been a good long while since I have actually recorded. I'm not going to try to date this episode right now, but as I've been talking about recently in the previous podcast, I'm just now, a lot of stuff's getting ahead. There's a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. For example, I'm starting a new position in my job, new promotion and such like that, and being promoted to be an assistant manager of one of the positions here at the local store that I work at. I'm also working on helping my significant other move into her new apartment near her university this weekend, and there's just a whole lot of other stuff going on. And probably one of the big main reasons why you guys haven't gotten an episode out is that I have been deep into playing Fire Emblem Three Houses, the brand new tactical JRPG for the Nintendo Switch. Now, I have not actually quote-unquote finished the game. I have finished the game, but I haven't finished the game in a manner that I deem it being completely done and that I can talk about it at length. So as I had said in prior podcasts, I wanted to devote an entire hour at least to the entire episode, I wanted to devote an entire hour, at least an hour worth of a podcast to that, just one game. I'm not going to talk about anything else that entire podcast. It's just going to be about Three Houses. Because there is really a lot that I've got a lot of opinions about the game that's mostly extremely positive, but I don't want to let the cat out of the bag quite yet on that. So I want to completely finish that game first, and then one of the next episodes that hopefully you will be able to listen to is just going to be about Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, since I am extremely busy, that means also that, again, we're going to have to continue on with this trend of shorter podcast lengths. This podcast in length could probably only go to about 20 or 30 or so minutes, unfortunately, but that's okay. That just means I can talk a little bit more concisely about what I was planning on speaking about. So, for this episode, I have two different recommendations. I have a video game, and then I have an anime. We're just going to go ahead and jump right into the anime that I want, or not the anime, we're going to jump right into the video game that I was going to talk about. And the video game of today's podcast is Dust: An Elysian Tale. Dust: An Elysian Tale is developed by a pretty unknown studio I've never heard of before. Developed by Humble Hearts, which was mainly developed by an independent designer by the name of Dean Dodriel. I've not heard him in very much else. It's been published by Microsoft Studios and therefore was an Xbox Live Arcade release back on the Xbox, funnily enough, on the Xbox 360. And it's also on the Xbox Live Arcade as well. It's also available on Steam and Windows and the PlayStation 4, and has just recently made its release onto the Nintendo Switch as of September 10th, 2018. The game itself was released in August 15th of 2012, and is a relatively old game, and the only reason why I'm talking about it now is because I recently, not like within the last month, because it's been all about Fire Emblem Three Houses, but within its release window on the Nintendo Switch, I have been able to play it. So let's go ahead and just talk about the concept of what Dust: An Elysian Tale is all about. So Dust: An Elysian Tale is an action RPG hack and slash Metroidvania style game. So there's a lot of terminology here, so let's go ahead and break that up. So the game itself is an action adventure game, and I can best explain exactly what this game is. It's kind of a 2D Devil May Cry-ish kind of game with an RPG skill progression element to it, mixed in a little bit with Metroidvania style exploration. Now, the Devil May Cry influence in that is due to the fact that your main character, who is a character named Dust, who looks like I'm gonna go ahead and just look at. I'm just gonna go ahead and state it right now. The entire game is done in this art style where every single character is an anthropomorphic animal. So that means that they're basically animals that look like human beings. Obviously, that means that this game has a pretty big following in the furry community. I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, so I'm going to let the furries be the furries, and I'm just going to go ahead and just talk about the game for what it is. So the game itself has you control your main character, Dust, who lives in this kind of fantastical world where he's lost his memory, and he attains this blade known as the Blade of Hara and this little guardian familiar known as Fidget. Dust has no memory whatsoever of his past, and then he gets caught up in between this conflict between the population of this world and then an evil, a supposedly evil army led by General Gaius. So there's a little bit of so the main conflict going on there is just Dust getting caught in between this war between the everyday folk and this evil militaristic force trying to oppress them. And the story itself is not exactly too terribly deep. There's a lot of dialogue, surprisingly. All of it's mostly voice acted too, which the voice acting is really, really strong as well. I actually I haven't really looked up and seen who all the voice actors are, but there are a lot of really popular anime voice actors that I've heard that I can hear in this entire game. I'll look that up in a little bit, but before I talk about that, so the main gameplay itself. So that's kind of the story. The gameplay itself is based kind of around a 2D side-scrolling action RPG, Metroidvania style. And the action RPG style definitely lends itself well to the stylistic action that, say, the Devil May Cry series is very well known for. So the Devil May Cry series is this combo-based gameplay where you can switch between weapons, and you mainly use a sword, obviously. And you just string together combos against different enemies in order to get either a better combo score, get better experience. Not really experience. There's no level progression in Devil May Cry, at least not in the earlier ones. And you just basically get yourself. You try to make you. The better you're doing at the game, the better you are at the game the better you are at the game depends on how stylish you can be while you execute all these combos. And the game and Dust and Elysian Tale does a really good job at translating that kind of three-dimensional style of combo system into just a 2D plane. You only have one sword, but you also have the ability to use say, magic that allows you to string together more combos together. For example, you can slash around with your sword a little bit in this 2D space, and then in between your combo, you can then use a magic attack, which then shoots your enemies up into the air. You can then jump and then continue the combo in midair, and then you can bring them back down to the ground and then finish off the combo in the ground. You could essentially be good enough at the game that you could start a possible infinite combo where you start off on the ground, juggle in the air, bring them back to the ground, and then launch them back up into the air and do some more juggling and just rinse and repeat until everyone is dead. Now, that doesn't mean that the game isn't entirely easy. There is a good difficulty curve, especially later in the game. And the way that you can counter this is that you are able to gain experience points by defeating enemies. There is a level progression system. For example, if you level up, you then get the chance to allot a certain bit of points to whatever attributes that you have. For example, you can have health, strength, defense, or magic, and depending on what the situation calls for, that is what you can then do. Depending on what the situation calls for, you can then use whatever level up points that you got in order to make yourself stronger for whatever situation that you're kind of stuck in. Particularly if there's a boss fight that requires you to use more magic. You can level grind it for a little bit, and then when you level up, set your attribute points to more magic, and then you should have very little issue with the game itself. As far as the actual exploration of the game goes as well, the game, if you look under Steam, if you look in the Steam library, it has the tag Metroidvania. I half agree with it, I half disagree with it. This is kind of the Shantae and the Pirate's Curse kind of level of Metroidvania, where there's not really a big interconnected map. There is, but it's closer to Shantae in the Pirate's Curse, where there's just certain areas of the game that you can teleport to, and transport yourself to, and they're definitely Metroidvania based. But there's not a big interconnected map that goes throughout the entire game, which is unfortunate. I've always been hankering for a good. I always hanker for a good Metroidvania game. Bloodstained kind of scratched that itch a little bit, but it definitely scratched that itch for just a little bit. But unfortunately, I don't think this is a true Metroidvania game, so it kind of sucks. It would have been nice to see if this had a much more interconnected map, but oh well. It had the whole level progression system that most Metroidvanias do have, so I kind of wish that the whole map was a little bit more open. It was a little bit more open world like a Metroidvania was, but oh well, that's okay. In terms of other aspects of the game, the gameplay itself that I can talk about, what does mean the aspect that does lend itself to being a Metroidvania, is that there are certain parts in the game where you do get power-ups that allow you to backtrack and then bypass something. For example, two of the main abilities that you need to use is your double jump and your climb, which you don't get immediately in the game. But once you get those, you do have the ability to go backtrack, and then find, say, the vines that you couldn't climb up the first time you went through. After you get the climb ability, you can then use those vines in order to bypass what you were having issues with the first time, and then explore a brand new area that you've never been to before. So that's pretty much it for the gameplay. Like I said, Dust is an action RPG. It leans more towards the action RPG than the Metroidvania, but there are some Metroidvania aspects in there, if that's certainly what you're looking for. As far as the sound goes, the sound design is great. The voice acting is really good. Dust himself, the main character, Dust himself, is voiced by Lucian Dodge, who's another anime voice actor. I need to look up and see what he's done. Lucian Dodge, who has he been recently? He hasn't really been a lot. He hasn't really been in a lot too much recently. He's currently the main character in the new Mobile Suit Gundam series. He's in quite a few of the Fire Emblem games, and particularly in Fire Emblem Three Houses, he is one of my favorite characters, Felix, which I'll gladly talk about that soon. But altogether, the voice actors do a really, really good job altogether. The music is great, too. The music is only done by one guy, Alexander Brandon, and then his fellow company, Hyperduck Soundworks, and it has a nice little Eastern flair to it. It kind of reminds me of Muramasa, the Demon Blade for the Wii, which was another stylistic 2D Devil May Cry Metroidvania-ish kind of game. In fact, now that I think about it, I never put this two and two together, but Dust definitely seems like it's a spiritual brother of Muramasa the Demon Blade. Maybe I'll talk about that game at some point too. Altogether, though, the entire game was developed by Dean Dodrill besides the composer, and that also lends itself into the graphics itself. The graphics has a really, really nice looking anime, not cel shaded, but it definitely looks like everything looks like it's, the design of the game itself, in terms of its visual standpoint, looks as if it was actually a hand-drawn animation for the most part. It's hard to tell if it's cel work or if it's sprite work, but regardless, it still looks really, really nice, and all the particle effects within the game look great as well. It all looks like it's hand-drawn, but again, that's hard to tell. It's hard to tell if it's either a cel work or if it's a sprite work. As far as how enjoyable the game is, the game itself only lasted me probably about 11 hours or so, which for a video game like this, that's not a whole lot. The game itself is extremely fun. I definitely enjoyed playing it. It's very likely it's not going to be a game that I'll return to anytime soon. There are some extra collectibles that you can get even after you finish the game. You can play through it again on a harder difficulty and definitely have a lot more fun with it. But unfortunately, the game doesn't have a lot of variety. The one thing that I like the Devil May Cry series for, and then again, a lot of the stylish one-person fighter games like those, is that there's a lot of there's a lot of different styles of gameplay that you can use to play through it, and Dust kind of only has one style, unfortunately, so it can get kind of stale on repeat playings. But other than that, I definitely do recommend the game. The game is only about, I think, like 15 or 20 bucks on the Nintendo Switch. I forget exactly how much I got it for. I think that's so. In all, I think that's all I can really say about Dust. I think it's a pretty good game. If you can get it on sale, you can easily get your money's worth out of it. It'll definitely remind you of better games in the style of gameplay, but if you're looking for something that has a nice looking art style, something that looks beautiful, and something that plays extremely well, I definitely do recommend picking it up. So with that, I think I'm going to give Dust: An Elysian Tale a very welcome recommendation. Definitely pick up the game. You can get it on Nintendo Switch. I'm pretty sure it's also on the iOS as well. You can also get it on PS4 and the Xbox Live Arcade, and then obviously you can get it on Steam. So I'm going to give it my big recommendation. I definitely enjoyed it. I think everyone who likes that Metroidvania style or action RPG style will definitely enjoy it. Alright, so with that, we're going to go ahead and shift gears into the next part of the podcast, where we're going to talk about the anime that I wanted to speak about today. And that anime is Violet Evergarden. So Violet Evergarden is an animated television series developed by Kyoto Animation, produced by Kyoto Animation, and was released for legal streaming on Netflix. There's 13 episodes and an OVA altogether. You can watch all 13 episodes legally on Netflix. The entire series was completely put up on January of 2018. The series first aired between January 11th to April 5th, 2018, after which the entire series was then put up on Netflix. So before we actually talk about the series, I'm going to go into a little bit more of a serious topic. So the anime itself was developed by Kyoto Animation. So Kyoto Animation is a really, really, really popular animation studio in Japan. Obviously, it's based in Kyoto. I wonder what gave that away. So Kyoto Animation is responsible for a lot of some of the best produced anime that we have seen in our modern days. They're responsible for Full Metal Panic. They're responsible for The Melancholy of Haruo Suzumiya, for Lucky Star. They also developed K-On! They developed the, what else they did? They just recently did, one of the best animated films. They're more popular for some of their films as well. They've just recently released A Silent Voice, which is probably one of the best anime films to be released in the last 5 or so years, alongside Your Name. So the serious part about this topic is the fact that Kyoto Animation's main office in, obviously, Kyoto, their first studio, was recently attacked by an arsonist. And at the time, when there was at least 70 people in the building, at least 35 workers have been confirmed deceased, and 34 others are still receiving treatment in hospitals for their injuries. Now, this is unprecedented, at least in Japan. We hear about issues like this all the time in America, but for Japan, attacks like this are not very common. Mass murder like this is very uncommon in Japan, and this has really, really shook the community. At least, this has shook both the anime community and the culture of Japan as a whole. So, I really want to take this time to thank Kyoto Animation for all the work that they have done, and I really want to just put this as a voice box and just get on my soapbox and put this in the microphone, that if you really want to help out Japan and you want to help out the animations, if you really want to help out the anime industry, this makes it all the more important to really, really support the official release. At this point in time, there was a GoFundMe for Kyoto Animation. As of now, the GoFundMe has reached over $2 million worth of donations. So at this point, all donations have been closed and they're not receiving any more. So at this point, the GoFundMe has reached its goal, and hopefully this will help continue heal But unfortunately, this doesn't mean that the 35 people who lost their lives will not heal. They're never going to come back, and their families are going to be hurt forever for this. So please, if you have the time and if you are an anime fan and you want to continue helping out this industry, I always say this: never pirate your stuff. Always make sure that if you can, watch it through legal services like Funimation, like Netflix, like Hulu, like Crunchyroll, like Verve. And just always, and especially in this case, just always keep your thoughts with both the survivors of the fire itself and also their families as well. Like I said, something like this never really happens in Japan. So this is actually something that's so out of the ordinary that it's worth mentioning, and I think it's worth mentioning no matter where it is in the world. The problem is that unfortunately issues like this happen a lot in America, so we're kind of numb to it. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also care when it happens to our fellow neighbors in other countries as well. So that dark bit out of the way, let's go ahead and actually talk about Violet Evergarden. So Violet Evergarden was, as I said, animated by the first studio of Kyoto Animation. And the story itself revolves around a character known as Violet. Violet was original in the world that we live in. It's in a different kind of fictional country. Kind of looks like industrial England a little bit. What happens is that there's this massive war. There's this massive civil war that occurred, and Violet was originally a soldier in this war. And during this entire time, while Violet was a soldier in this war, she got close to her commanding officer, Major Gilbert. Unfortunately, near the very, very end of the war, after both of them were massively injured, Violet herself lost both of her arms, and had to get prosthetic metal arms, not like actual robotic arms that could be used for other things. And she lost Major Gilbert. We're not entirely certain what happened to him. We're led to believe that he probably was killed in the war itself. But he left Violet but because of the bond between Violet and Gilbert, Violet was left with a lot of confusion after Gilbert said with his last words before he disappeared near the end of the war. He told Violet, "I love you." And the problem with Violet herself is that she doesn't have the greatest grasp of her feelings or a true empathy for other people's emotions. She's not very in touch with her emotions, and therefore has no idea really what it meant for the Major to tell her that, "I love you." So after the war, Violet attempts to reintegrate back into human society and back into civilian society, and becomes a worker at a post office, where she then works as an auto memories doll. And in this world, what an auto memory doll is a ghostwriter. A ghostwriter is another writer, someone who's not the official writer, but someone who does the writing for them in the case that, say, the other person is unable to, or is unable to. And the main role for an auto memory doll in this country is that they are tasked with writing letters for others who either can't read or write, or can't express their emotions in the best way possible. And throughout this entire journey, Violet learns to become more attuned with her emotions, while also trying to find out exactly what Major Gilbert meant by that "I love you." And so that's the basic concept of the series, and the entire series itself is kind of split up into episodic natures. So there's two different sides to Violet Evergarden. There's the episodic nature, where Violet takes on a lot of these requests, works with other people, and helps to ghostwrite their letters that they're trying to write to others. And in all honesty, these are probably where the biggest strengths of the series are. A lot of these episodes either range from being pretty solid to being some of the most well-written and most emotional episodes I've seen in an anime. You really get a feel for you get to see Violet insert herself into other people's lives, trying to either improve them while also trying to improve herself, so she can push her own characterization forward and actually reintegrate back into civilian life. Kind of going into the character subsection for a little bit, Violet seems like she's a very bland kind of character. She has a blank expression on the entire time. She has a very dull voice, portrayed extremely well by both her Japanese voice actress, Yui Ishikawa, and also her English voice actor, Erica Harlacher. Both of them, both these roles do both the English and the Japanese roles do a very, very good job at actually getting that baseline, so it allows Violet the chance to grow even more. And Violet's characterization as the series goes on just increasingly gets more and more layered, more and more developed, and then you start learning exactly why she is the way she is. And the reason why she is the way she is because of her background when she was in the military in the middle of the Civil War. She was basically bred to be a weapon for the most part. Now, this is a kind of story that we have seen multiple times before in an anime, but it is done extremely well in Violet Evergarden. And the other batch of episodes we do get is some of the political intrigue of the reasoning behind all this Civil War and whether or not another war is going to rear its ugly head again. All the while Violet tries to learn more and more exactly why, why Major Gilbert had disappeared. And those episodes aren't the greatest. It's nice, it's great to see those, but where Violet Evergarden's real strength can be is in these episodic episodes, where Violet just puts herself alongside regular civilians. And even though on the outside you can see her emotion, you can see her blank stare, and you can see a lack of emotion. Once these episodes roll on, the curtain starts to unveil itself, and then you start seeing Violet gain more and more emotions, and is more in tune with her emotions, and how well she reacts to some of these issues that these regular civilians go on with. And every single one is kind of a little bit different. For example, there's one of the episodes, there's an old younger sister trying to reconnect with her older brother after he became a veteran in the war. There's one episode with a drunk painter trying to reconnect with his family while also writing a new short story. But easily the best episode in the entire series is episode 10, where Violet gets herself involved in the affairs of a young child, a very, very young child, and her terminally ill mother. I don't want to say any spoilers about it, but episode 10 of Violet Evergarden could possibly be one of the best episodes of anime in this at least in this modern era. It's certainly one of the best from 2018, and it's definitely worth a watch. It's almost worth a watch just for episode 10 alone. You can watch maybe the first 2 or 3 episodes to get used to it, and then if you really want to decide what the series is all about, and if you really want to see the series at its best, I do recommend skipping all the way to episode 10 and just watching episode 10, because it is one of the most perfect episodes in anime, period. There's plenty of other great characters as well. All the other workers at the post office, like Violet's boss, Claudia, Catalea, Benedict, Erica, and Iris, they're all really, really enjoyable characters. They don't get nearly as much screen time, obviously, as Violet herself, and some of their stories aren't nearly as interesting as Violet's own story, but they're all enjoyable characters in their own rights. Moving on to the sound and the animation, the sound itself was actually, I've never even heard of this composer before. His name is Evan Call. I can't tell if that's just the name of a music production company or if it's actually a person, but the music itself has a really, really peaceful tone to it as well. It's really, I can't pick out any singular tracks on my own to give you an example, but the music itself is definitely one of the more calming and relaxing original soundtracks I've heard in anime. I definitely do recommend, if you like the music when it works within it, I definitely do recommend going out and seeing if you can find out if you can find out, say, the names of your favorite tracks from the soundtrack and give them a listen, because they're definitely very ambient and very relaxing in their own right. Now, obviously, since this was developed by Kyoto Animation, the animation itself is absolutely beautiful. Now, this is one big thing. This is not a very action-heavy series, so if you're going into the series expecting any kind of action, I definitely do not recommend it. This is not that kind of series. Specifically, the series itself is given a coming-of-age genre, aka that basically means it's a slice-of-life series, so there's very little action. But the animation that is provided for the series looks absolutely gorgeous. The character designs look absolutely amazing. I mean, if you look at Violet Evergarden's, if you look at Violet's own character design itself, her design is absolutely gorgeous, and everyone else looks great as well. And this just is a testament to how many talented folks are at Kyoto Animation, and how unfortunately sad it is that probably a good chunk of the animators who probably worked on the series might not even be alive right now. So, all right, bringing it to a dark place, we're going to bring it back now. So how enjoyable was Violet Evergarden? Very, very enjoyable. The series is kind of a roller coaster. It either is pretty dang good, it can get a little dull. Some of the episodic parts of the series can get a little dull and are not quite as enjoyable as some of the other ones are. But when the series gets really, really good, it is really good. Like I said, episode 10, probably one of the best anime episodes I've seen in a good long while. So I definitely recommend checking it out just for episode 10. So I'm going to go ahead and close this all out and just say Violet Evergarden is a nice recommendation for me. I definitely recommend watching it. Again, there's only 13 episodes long. You can watch it all on Netflix. There's also an OVA, which surprisingly I haven't even actually watched yet. I probably should actually check that out at some point. From what I know, we're actually going to be getting 2 different movies. We're getting a movie in September of this year, and then we're going to get another movie in January of this year as well. So I definitely am interested to see how these movies play out as well. I hope that the first movie isn't a compilation movie. Compilation movies are very, very popular for some animation studios. It saves them budget while also earning a fair bit of the box office in terms of ticket prices. I hope they're not. It's not a compilation movie. So in conclusion, I definitely recommend Dust and Elysian Tale. Very good action RPG. Can kind of get a little samey after a while, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. And Violet Evergarden, one of the most peaceful anime series I've ever seen in a while, while also having one of the single best episodes I've seen in anime in a good long while. So thank you so much. This podcast went actually a little bit longer than I thought it would. So thank you again for listening. I really hope that you'll come back for the next episode. Just prepare. There is going to be a Fire Emblem Three Houses episode. It's probably going to replace one of the weekly podcasts, and it's just going to be all about Fire Emblem Three Houses. So I definitely hope that you stay tuned for that as well. And for everyone else, I hope you guys stay tuned for the next episode, and I cannot wait to see you guys in the next podcast.